sound.
Okay, colleagues, welcome to the second meeting of the Committee for the Economy in this new session. Can I, on behalf of the committee, publicly welcome our two new members, and it's good to be back to full strength. Advise members that the committee meeting is now being broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. At this stage, I'll take apologies, we have none, but we are being joined remotely by Mr. Delargy. As I said, members, on behalf of the committee, I do wish to welcome both Kate and Colin, who will be excellent additions to our committee. Under Chairperson's business, members will be aware that the draft programme for government has now been published, and economic matters feature heavily on that. The committee will obviously seek representations to the TEO committee in relation to our thoughts on that, so we will do that in due course. Could I seek the committee's agreement to write to the Department seeking further information on the £150 million investment zone, Childcare Skills Academy, the Skills Academy, review of the energy strategy and proposed changes to the electricity grid connection, all mentioned within the programme for government draft document? Thank you. Business plan members are advised that the Department has published its 2024-2025 business plan, and this is in the tabled items. Are members content that we seek further information on the Social Enterprise Action Plan and the 3-year apprenticeship programme? Thank you. Can I advise members as well that the Permanent Secretary for the Department has contacted the Deputy Chairperson and I to have an informal briefing on the 2024-2025 business plan, and I think once we do that, if members are content, it would be good to invite the Permanent Secretary to present that to the full committee. Members content with that? Thank you. Item number 3 then, members' draft minutes on page 6 of the pack from our meeting last week. Are members content that these are a true and accurate reflection of our deliberations? Agreed. Then item 4, members, matters arising. I just want to raise one. We had correspondence from the department from our request that Hospitality Ulster be invited to join the Labour Relations Agency Engagement Forum. The department replied to say that that would be a matter for the LRA to decide. Are members content if we then write to the LRA seeking the committee's view that they should be invited onto that panel? Okay, perfect. We then move to item number 5, the Northern Ireland Skills Council. Advise members that the committee will now receive an oral evidence session from the Northern Ireland Skills Council and refer members to a number of pages within their pack. At page 34 is a copy of the Skills Council briefing paper. At page 40 is the Employer Skills Report. At page 92 is the Skills Barometer. Page 98 is the First Skills Strategy Monitoring Report. And a copy of the Minister's Skills Agenda Statement is at page 152. And I will welcome our committee guests, in particular Kathleen. It's great to have a North Belfast lady here at the committee. Good to have you here. Kathleen O'Hare, who is chairperson of the Northern Ireland Skills Council. Gordon Parks, chairperson of the Green Energy Subcommittee. Caroline van der Veltz, chairperson of the Skills, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee. Deborah O'Hare, chairperson of the Education and Skills Committee. And Lorna McAddo, who is chairperson of the Digital Skills Subcommittee. I am delighted on behalf of the committee to welcome you all here. I'm very happy to hand over to you for an opening oral statement.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think I know quite a few people around this committee today, and thank you very much for the opportunity to engage with the committee on the work being undertaken by the Northern Ireland Skills Council. I have had a background, for those of you who don't know, I have a background in education, both in the North West and North Belfast, and also with the Examination Board and Belfast Met, and also laterally as part of the Skills Council. I was officially appointed as chair in June 2023, which coincided with the formal constitution of the council, which includes 7 independent members appointed through open competition and 10 ex officio members. So I'm going to introduce you at this point to, they're going to introduce themselves to 4 of the chairs of the subcommittees. We have 5 subcommittees, one not here today because he's on leave, because he's head of the Examination Board. So maybe if we start with Caroline and she can introduce herself.
Good morning, committee. I'm Caroline van der Veltz. I am the chair of the Skills EDI committee which really looks at focusing specifically in on those barriers and those that are most disadvantaged in society by way of creating routes to skills, education and employment. I'm currently HR Director at Danske Bank.
Good morning, I'm Deborah O'Hare. I'm Chair of the newly formed Education and Skills Subcommittee, and my day job, I'm Principal of Wallace High School in Lisburn.
Okay, Gordon.
Good morning, committee. My name is Gordon Parks and I'm Chair of the newly renamed Green Skills Delivery Group. So we've changed it from Green Energy Subcommittee to Green Skills because it's broader than just energy, and it's a delivery group, so we're all about the delivery of the appropriate skills.
Good morning. I'm Lorna McAdoo. I am the Chair of the Digital Skills Subcommittee. I am currently the Group Director for ESG and the NI Operations Manager for Version 1, who are an IT organisation. I've been responsible for growing the team in Belfast, but more recently really focused on delivering their corporate ESG strategy, which includes diversity and inclusion, our net zero plans and so forth.
And our fifth subcommittee is Skills Supply, and that is headed by Jerry Campbell, who's currently the CEO of CCEA. And he's had a very busy time during June, July, so this is his couple of weeks of leave after the examination stage. So our primary role in the Skills Council is to provide strategic advice to ministers and senior officials on the development of the skills policy, aligning the objectives of the new happily received programme of government and the Minister's economic vision. At the time of our appointment, there was no Assembly and there was no Minister. So, as outlined in the written brief which you all have, the Council is designed to represent a broad range of stakeholders in the skills system. Our members are drawn from business, education, trade unions, community and voluntary sector. A full list of the members is in Annex A of your written brief. So the Council is committed to driving cross-sectoral collaboration, aiming to enhance cohesion in Northern Ireland's skills system and address fragmentation. And I know you probably will come back on that fragmentation later in our questions. We have senior representation on our Skills Council from the Department of Education, the Department for the Communities and the Department of the Economy. It is really encouraging to see this level of engagement across the departments on skills, and you will be able to observe the outcomes of this collaboration in the coming year. You will also hear from the chairs of the subcommittees about the challenges we face and how they address them. We've had numerous engagements over the last year. I think at this stage I've probably met in excess of 1,000 people, and we've also had 4 meetings, 2 in Belfast, 1 in Derry and another one in Newry. We've also engaged with stakeholders in South West and visited the impressive new FE campus in Enniskillen and plan to go to Coleraine later this month for the opening of their new campus. The Council is fully committed to developing our presence across Northern Ireland. We have 5 subcommittees and they will be bringing forward advice on key economic and employment challenges. I've outlined some of those in the written brief, but just the figures that have come out yesterday show that we still have very high economic inactivity, we still have low productivity, we still have a huge number of between 16 and 24-year-olds not in education, employment and training. Northern Ireland still has low wages in comparison to the rest of the UK and limited workforce diversity. We have fewer people with third-level qualifications, and I know that this committee is committed to redressing that. We've declining participation in further education. We lose upwards of 5,500 people every year to universities in England, Scotland and Wales and the Republic of Ireland, many of whom don't come back and are lost to the Northern Ireland economy. Compounding these issues are restrictive UK migration policies, while not a very popular thing to discuss, it is really affecting border counties. We have an ineffective apprenticeship levy and the need for green jobs to address sustainability right across Northern Ireland. So each of the chairs will outline very briefly their plans for their committees. So we'll start with Gordon and Green Energy.
Thank you, Chair. The pathway to net zero carbon emissions was set out in 2021 by the Department for the Economy, and that has been a key driver for the Green Skills agenda. This is a major opportunity for this economy. Currently over 2 billion a year goes in fossil fuels. All of that money can be reinvested in this economy and delivering our own energy within this economy and creating the appropriate jobs to support that. So to deliver it, we need the appropriate skills and the appropriate people. So the department set up a group and asked me to chair it last year. And the first thing we did was commission an energy audit to talk to some general about green skills. The results of the audit were it identified 8 sectors which employ people in the green economy, and it is much broader than energy, which is why we've now refocused it on green skills and not just green energy skills. The 8 sectors were large-scale energy production, wind farms, for example, infrastructure, and that's electricity, gas, water and waste, domestic low-carbon economy and energy efficiency. That was the third one. The fourth one was industrial processes, fourth one the circular economy, fifth one transport, and then we had agriculture and fisheries. So all of those combined employ around 105,000 people currently. The audit estimates that there are potentially between 28 and 58,000 new jobs. The reason that that's ill-defined is because, again, the definition of green jobs needs to be broadened. If you look at a pure definition of a green job being people that are directly employed, it's 28,000, but there's also lots of indirect people. For example, we need more data analysts to support the overall drive towards the green economy. So if you take all the direct and indirect jobs that are a result of the green economy, there's an additional potential 58,000 jobs over the next 10 years. It's a huge opportunity. These jobs are highly skilled and highly trained. So it's a significant growth area for the economy. However, there are significant challenges, many of which Kathleen has already mentioned as our chair. A few additional points to mention is we have full employment. It's the best it's ever been, at 1.9% in Northern Ireland compared with 4.1% across the rest of the UK. So that's a major challenge in that we have full employment. Alongside that, we still have the highest level of economically inactive. So the challenge is, how do we get the economically inactive into work, and what initiatives can we develop within the green sector? Too many individuals are only qualified to level 2 or less. So having a lot more entry-level programs that sit below apprenticeships are going to be a key driver in our action plan. Only 10% of employers provide apprenticeships, and yet 33% want to provide apprenticeships. So helping employers, the smaller employers, lots of employers, smaller employers want to do and deliver apprenticeships. They need support and help to do that. So there's significant challenges that we face. The other 2 that I want to mention specifically are only 1 in 13 females in STEM jobs. It's just not good enough for our society, and there's not enough people with disabilities in the green sector, the green skills sector. So those are also opportunities as well as challenges. The Green Skills Delivery Group is currently working on an action plan. What we're doing is we can't handle all of the 8 areas at once, because many of the areas that I've mentioned don't have the right skills structures in place at the moment. The areas that have strong skilled structures are large energy production, infrastructure, and domestic low carbon and energy efficiency. So those 3 areas we're focusing on first, and we're developing our action plan. First draft will be ready by the end of September, so it's been worked on all of this year. 4 key areas of focus will be the current skills system and structures and how it works, and where it works well and where it needs changing. Secondly, a much better and more collaborative, coordinated approach from education right through to the various employers, and then the support that we get from government is the second main area. Third main area is improving awareness of careers opportunities of green jobs. It's not well enough known by families, by parents, about the opportunities that exist. So we have a major campaign of promotion of careers opportunities. And the final area will be how we develop the skilled workforce. And to finally just give you examples of what we've already been doing. So we're not just developing an action plan, we're already doing things. This year we launched for the first time a joint utilities entry-level programme. That was for people with no qualifications to allow them to work for NIE, Northern Ireland Water, the gas companies, to get themselves into an apprenticeship. These are people that don't have the right qualifications to apply for an apprenticeship. We launched that as a pilot scheme collectively and collaboratively, and the CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, facilitated the training, and it's been very successful, so much so that we're going to launch another one in January next year. We've launched a Data Analytics Academy with Belfast Met. We've launched a Planning Academy with Northern Regional College, and those have been so successful in bringing new people in without the appropriate skills that we're now going to run them again. So there's lots of examples already of new things that are happening.
Gordon's is probably the most developed of the committee because it has been ongoing for a while. The other one that is more developed than the latter two, which are newly formed, is Caroline's SETI group.
Yes, so the Skills, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee actually started before the Northern Ireland Skills Council, so it's been in place since 2022. It was formed under recommendation 44 of the skills strategy, which included membership from gender, disability, academia, women in STEM, childcare, equality manufacturing, partnering with unions and cross-departmental representatives as well. So it's a very good example of where different departments have actually pulled and collaborated together to have positive inclusive outcomes. The initial work that SETI undertook was really a good and a deep analysis of the labour market characteristics. So taking all of the Section 75 categories in Northern Ireland and providing a baseline, and that happened around about March 22. We did a series of deep dives into areas looking at data, evidence and the current landscape, and brought in specific expertise from academia and from industry as well. There was 4 areas that were prioritised: gender, disability and age, specifically young people and old people, or older people. Complementing this work, we really have worked with both the Department for Communities on their gender strategy, disability and work strategy, and the Department for Education in terms of their early years and their childcare strategy. And outside the SETI Secretariat, and members of the SETI Committee are also sitting in other committees as well in consultation. So really bringing in a lot of expertise to focus on some of these really significant problems. We have made good progress to date, both internally and externally, looking to drive and influence skills policy across the departments around the areas of inclusion, recognising that it's not just one or the other, so the focus on intersectionality and actually the human experience has been fundamental. The initial deep dives have brought forth a number of specific successes. So the evidence helped secure 40 million for the Northern Ireland funding both DFE, DFC and Invest NI programmes, of which 15 million was allocated to programmes such as Step Up, really targeting some of those priority groups, so disability, those with special educational needs and those not in employment, education or training. We're represented, as I've said, across all of the other areas of strategy and of the interdepartmental areas as well. And I suppose, where's our current situation? So we've kind of finished the first iteration, the first stage, and we've just recast our membership. So we are setting out with some additional expertise who have joined the SETI Council. And our next meeting is going to be on the 14th of November with new membership in place. The alignment of the strategy in our next phase of work is really around the Minister's economic vision, so good jobs, productivity, regional balance and carbon emissions reduction. We have a forward work plan which we're building and we will crystallise on the 14th of November. And that will really look at areas which we can most successfully influence. So looking at childcare, age and disability specifically, around trying to bring more people into the workplace. We know there is a significant problem with the economically inactive and those that want to be employed but can't, through caring responsibilities, through childcare challenges as well. So really looking at how we can successfully influence policy and activity to bring forth more talent into the workplace and really contribute to the economy.
So those are the two committees that are more developed, and the committee that's only been set up in the last month is education and skills. And Deborah, if you want to briefly address that, and then I'll go to Lorna, who's only in her post 2 weeks. So.
Okay, thank you everyone. So what I'm currently doing as chair of the newly formed Education and Skills is first of all putting together a terms of reference. So the committee membership, we've asked council members who would like to go onto the committee. So we've got a number of volunteers, which is great. And then we'll have our first meeting later this month. In terms of my discussions, which have been refreshing, I have to say, with the Department of Education and the Department for the Economy, so that's been really helpful. In discussions about the way forward with this, my thoughts are that we'll focus on auditing skills in education in Northern Ireland, with a focus in the first year on levels 3 to 6 on the National Qualifications Framework. So we're aware of the economic inactivity, so rather than having an age focus, we'll not have an age focus, we'll have a level focus. And we're also aware that there's a skills gap at levels 4 and 5 for employers in Northern Ireland. So that's the angle that we're likely to take moving forward. So my thoughts are, for the first couple of months, we would look at the Republic of Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales, and some international examples of alignment of skill progression and levels of qualification, just to inform ourselves of what's actually happening here locally, what's happening wider, and then to invite a range of experts, employers, higher education, FE, career service and industry voices in to present to us on skills gaps from their perspective at levels 3 to 6. And then I would reiterate one of the refreshing things is that we're being well supported by both the Department of Education and the Department for the Economy. So I'm very positive about it and look forward to the work ahead this year.
And there'll be senior staff from both departments sitting on that subcommittee, which will have very pivotal work. The Digital Skills Action Plan, I'm sure it's in your diary. It will be launched on the 25th of September. So that will be the first one. I think it's going to be launched in E3. The Digital Skills Group will now take on a new remit. It previously was chaired by John Healy and centred around software and computing. Under the new chairmanship, it will be under Lorna. So she's hitting the ground running here with her, in her first week. Do you want to say what your remit is going to be?
Yeah, so as Kathleen mentioned, the Digital Skills Action Plan will be launched on the 25th. It's very focused on what's required to deliver the digital skills to drive growth in the tech and software sectors specifically. Going forward, the subcommittee now needs to look at 3 other key areas, in my opinion. The first is a lens on social inclusion and making sure that no one gets left behind because of a lack of digital skills. The second is looking at the digital skills requirements across all of our sectors and not just the software sector, because as you know, a lot of the jobs that we have in our economy, a lot of them requires an initial entry level at digital skill level. And the third, and this is really looking at some of the work that the rest of my colleagues is looking at, is that disability and gender, and really trying to drive more of that and more young girls and more disabled through to STEM subjects. And that's really where I want to go. So with that in mind, I want to refocus on the subcommittee and the people on the committee at the moment to make sure that there is a regional balance, that there is an inclusion focus, and that there is a sectorial focus right across all of the sectors and not just specifically in software.
And that was one of the issues, UK, of this region, we have the best connectivity, but sometimes the lowest digital uptake around companies. That combined with what the skills group are looking at, a shortage of leadership and management training across that. So you can see that skills has all the issues have been divided across at the currently 5 subcommittees, and we were very pleased to see skills underpin each area of the programme of government, and we will look forward to working with government and key stakeholders around Northern Ireland to bring about that less fragmented approach towards skills. As one of companies said to me, we don't necessarily want that, but we're looking for leadership. So we're hoping that the Skills Council will provide that umbrella and advice both ways both government and business, and we can all go forward together to create a really worthwhile prosperity here in this part of Ireland.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Podrick, online. We'll move on to Gary.
Well, thanks very much. Very much appreciate the work that the Council's doing, and we very much value your contribution today. A couple of questions for me. First of all, just in terms of your engagement piece that you've had across the board, obviously you've met with many stakeholders. One of the areas that you touch on is around regional needs and the fact that obviously, depending on what part of Northern Ireland you're in, the needs can be very much different. I suppose just in your initial feedback, you've met with different councils, you're going to meet with others. Could you maybe talk through some of maybe the different voices that you're hearing from those various perspectives?
During the time we were in Derry in June, so it was during election time, so we didn't meet any of you at that stage, but we're very aware that different regions have different priorities and more sophisticated systems. For example, when we were in Uri, we were bowled over at the development of business cohesion there under the Chamber of Commerce, and then we looked at maybe the Southwest where there's big business, big voices, where things, quite easy things, could be put in place to make things easier. Everything from how councils collect glass, which means that we could have a more sustainable way forward, to looking at the expansion of university places in Magee, etc., to looking at engineering and manufacturing in Mid-Ulster, where there's quite sophisticated systems that bring employers and education together. So there are regional and sectoral differences, and that is one of the issues that we have, because there needs to be an overarching strategy, for Northern Ireland, which then trickles down. And we're currently looking at, in a number of committees, both the Scottish system and the system in the Republic of Ireland, because they have that overarching strategy, but we're conscious that you cannot lift something from another region and just plant it here, because it needs to fit into the current culture and environment that we have. But we think that there are regional differences, but there needs to be that overarching strategy which provides equality and inclusion to all of Northern Ireland.
I suppose I asked the question, obviously the further education sector has a huge role to play in terms of skills, but we know that there's a decline also in terms of numbers attending further education in many cases, and one of the challenges that you said was the opportunity to gain key skills acquisition are absent from some regions. And I suppose in terms of your thoughts as to how do we encourage that, obviously there's a number of students that are leaving our shores to go elsewhere, but in terms of your piece of work, are there any initial thoughts as to how we arrest that situation as well?
Well, I think Deborah and her committee is already looking at some form of audit across Northern Ireland from level 3 above. Do you want to address that, Deborah?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important point, and I think the focus on level 3 to 6 hopefully would encapsulate that significant challenge for the FE sector. So level 3 being A-level equivalents up to degree level, level 6 that's at graduate level. So it's just what's happening in there, where do the skills line up, what are we offering, what's a taxonomy of skill and education, how they set off against each other with qualifications. So I think if we get an understanding of that and speak to employers and educators, then we'll have a better understanding of making recommendations about how to overcome some of those challenges.
Thanks for that, Deborah. And I suppose just a final point in terms of your work, and obviously it's a new committee and very much welcome that, and obviously given your own experience as well, I think you're going to have obviously a valuable input. But one of the areas that we have a focus on is obviously the careers advice piece. We had a joint meeting with the Education Committee in terms of hearing some of that practice that exists elsewhere, but it's frustration for us in terms of, I suppose, pathways and for particularly younger people knowing exactly where to go. So in terms of your initial thoughts, even in terms of your own personal experience from your own background, are there initial steps besides the portal, which is I think initially starting to be developed, are there initial thoughts as to how we can take action quickly, move on, I suppose, as you've said, from strategies to action?
Yeah, I think the careers piece is challenging. One of the reasons being, in that 20 years ago, you could have really articulated a career for life. And I think now, by trying to blend careers and skills more seamlessly, what we want to do is prepare young people for a seamless transition from career to career and jobs that are changing. And it's how we blend those two together and give the right advice. And I think that taxonomy of a framework around skills set against qualifications will help that as well. But it is a challenging one because of that paradigm shift, in a sense, in terms of careers of the future, because of the technological advancements that we have ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think the fact that there used to be the areas of expertise in every FE college, and they would play to those expertise. Now, the downside of them playing to that expertise, there's whole skills formation that is maybe lost to that region, and that is an issue. But I'm hoping in this committee, where there's really good cross-departmental collaboration, that maybe schools and FE will work together better in integrity of offer. There are a huge number of children maybe staying on in post-primary, being taught a vocational area where people haven't been trained in that vocational area. Now, that is an issue for the two departments. It's also an issue for FE. And just like we are talking about an overall strategy for Northern Ireland, the greater cooperation between all the FE colleges should see those skill sets being available in the neighbouring FE college, rather than simply somebody having to travel 100 miles to do plumbing, or to do a course in BIM, or to do a postgraduate course and not find it here at HE, having to go to Republic of Ireland, England, Wales or Scotland, and then not come back.
Thank you. Kate?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm new to the Economy Committee. It's my first meeting. So apologies if some of my questions are a bit simple. The second monitoring report was approved, but it wasn't published. Why was that?
I think that's an issue that is with the department, and I think in the ever-changing landscape, which the Minister has kind of brought a huge energy to on skills, I think he wants it to be tying in more with his strategy of good jobs, etc. He has his plans very firmly rooted in the programme of government, and indeed his statement to this committee in June and the subsequent business plan. I think you will see the outworkings of what happens in the reports and plans for future. But I have to say, the skills landscape is a massively developing one, and we can't continue to be wedded to a strategy or a policy that it needs to be annually refreshed. And I think you will see the outworkings in the work and indeed the legislation that is brought around skills.
Okay, thank you. I found it really encouraging that all your presentations have really focused on inclusion and the focus on disability and gender. I met with Belfast City Council last week, and they were talking about a pilot that they ran which really focused on aptitudes that two big employers wanted. They put 20 recruits through, I think it was an 18-week programme, and of those 20 people, 18 have found employment, and they said the majority of them actually had disabilities. There were a lot of women returning to the workforce as well. I'm struck by the points you made about the pilot and the success of these. How do you scale these sorts of programs up? Because it strikes me we have to be creative and think of different ways of developing the skills pipeline. How do you scale those up, and is that something you're actively doing, working with other councils who are able to tap into those community networks?
Well, I think I'll maybe hand over to Gordon in a minute, but just to say that we have the advantage in our role. One day I can be in Enniskillen and the next day I could be, in Coleraine. And there's a lot of, good practice that you see in one area. And, you know, I've joined people together from Inniskillen with somebody from Newry, with somebody, you know, part of what we do is to actually share good practice across there. Some things take money. If you look at what's happening in Belfast City Council, I mean, they've been on this journey for quite some time, even with the cafe that they have in the building. But some other councils maybe haven't grappled with this in the same way. And part of what we're doing is to sort of hook people up and say, you know, this is what could be done. But, you know, this is an easy win to people with disabilities actually actively engaged in the workforce. Gordon, you will have good examples of that.
Yeah, and I think to answer the question on how you scale, it's important to start small, to pilot test, to trial, to work through all of the problems and issues with a small group first. Once you've that worked through, then you've got the evidence that proves this works, and then you can get the buy-in from more employers. The problem structurally we have is that we've only around 260 really large employers with strong apprenticeship programs in place. We have lots of small employers that really want to get into this space and find it difficult. So the collaboration of that entry-level program, what we were seeing there was large employers supporting smaller employers to take on these individuals and learn how to develop them. So scaling up is a slow process. The wrong thing to do is to try to go too large too quick, because then it falls on its face, and that's what's happened in some initiatives in the past. So these entry-level programs, the right approach is being adopted by the department and ourselves, in that we're working through all the issues small and then scaling up after that. And then larger employers like my own, Northern Ireland Electricity, we're scaling up by going from 10 apprentices a year to 60 apprentices a year to 80 apprentices a year. You're going to see the same in the water companies, in the gas companies. They all need to evolve so the larger companies will naturally scale up. Then the smaller companies that are part of the supply chain, they can be part of that, in that the larger companies can train and provide structures for the smaller companies as well. So it is all about working together collaboratively. That's how we'll scale up.
Yeah, and there is a sense where larger companies, and you all play your role in this, could be encouraged to, in parenting, smaller companies. You know, we need to change the philosophy in Northern Ireland for what's in it for me, but what's in it for us. Because if we all get better, then it's to the advantage of the smaller company and the larger company as well. And that's a change in culture in Northern Ireland, but we're all part of that currently.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Sorry, Kathleen, just to go back to the question that Kate had raised. So in March, the council approved the monitoring report at their meeting, and then it went back to the department, but then the department has chosen not to publish it. Is that?
It's back with the department. The department are taking a number of directions on skills, and I think you'll see the outworkings of some of those, particularly through our committee. We also met with the minister, and we talked about the direction that we're speaking to you today about. And I suppose that that will take a bit of reformation, because this is a new council with a new direction of people who are actively involved in these areas. And each of these committees bring together council members, but they also bring together key people from those areas. So I think, you know, there is a need for policy and reports to be real time.
And then does that tie in then to the new skills action plan that the minister may be publishing in the coming weeks? Okay, so it's going to be a 3-year action plan, is the committee's understanding?
Well, that's a question for the minister, but we will have a number of action plans that we will be taking forward, and that will be the advice for the minister and senior officials on what we decide as from the key stakeholders, because we sit not just with government, we sit in looking at real time what's happening in business in Northern Ireland. So that will be the advice we give, but our role is advice, and our role is advisory. We hope that is taken, because we will come from a huge critical mass, and already we've seen the minister is very receptive to advice from the Skills Council.
And then in relation to the dedicated skills fund within the department, so the Minister had allocated, if I remember, 12.1 million this year. Just wondering, has the Council given any input into how that 12 million was allocated?
I believe that the Minister would wish to have our input. That hasn't happened to date, but would like our input and already knows a lot of our direction. He met with, at that stage, the 4 subcommittee chairs and myself to look at what we had found so far, and is very keen to see us input into any new strategy that he brings out.
And then just finally from me, has the Minister sought the Council's advice in terms of how he's defining and developing his 4 economic pillars of his new vision?
We look at skills.
Yeah.
And his pillars are about jobs as such.
Yeah.
Now, it's where skills meet with jobs, and I know there is a meeting set up or about to be set up with us and his panel of experts as well, because there will have to be some tie-in between skills and jobs.
Yeah. And does the Council have a view of what a good job is?
Individually, we've had a talk about what good jobs is. We haven't fed into the report on that. We will feed into a response to the programme of government, which will undertake that. But we are looking very greatly at the skills as such. But there will be an overlap.
Perfect. And that will be important. It's just you'll have a vital role, and I know that you say that the vision focuses, a lot on jobs, but having the opportunity to upskill within your job and ensuring that these jobs are open to everyone in all sections of our society is going to have a vital role of skills in that. So look forward to reading your response.
I think that's a really important point as well for us to further.
Padraig.
Thank you, Chair, and hopefully you can hear me okay this time. It's letting me unmute, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, look, thank you firstly to the panel who've come in. You've answered a lot of my questions already, but I do have 4 kind of themes that I want to touch on. You've talked about regional balance, and that's obviously key in this as well. But I'm very conscious that when we talk about skills, there's not, I suppose, one approach to skills that's going to work in every area of the North, or indeed in every community as well. So I think it's very important, obviously, and I just would like to get a better understanding of how that has featured into your work so far, and how you intend that will continue to feature. For example, the need for certain skills in Derry versus Belfast versus Newry and other areas of the North is obviously going to be very unique. So I'm keen to get a better understanding as to how you intend to factor that in to ensure that there is greater regional balance.
At the moment, we have been looking at different regions and comparing those, and I'm sure you're well aware of border peoples. We have had a meeting with them, and we are currently seeing great comparisons to different regions. How things are happening in Fermanagh to Derry to South Down and South Armagh as well. So there are regional differences, but there are also regional similarities. And for being such a small region, it's surprising that people haven't reached across and had the opportunity, or maybe it's just that we haven't given them the opportunity to learn from each other. But the Belfast would be completely different to somewhere else, and that would be the same with London. It would be a completely different economy to elsewhere. But we have looked at the regional focus. I'm not sure if any of my committee want to come in with regional focus, but it's something that we're looking at very greatly. Currently, in the autumn, we're going to be doing a deep dive into skills, and that will focus actually on the southwest. Because they have asked us to look at that with them, because they would like an overarching strategy on skills before they actually put plans in place. And I'm hoping that might kickstart other regions as well. There are regional differences, but there are an awful lot more similarities than we actually give credit for.
Great. Well, look, thank you for that. And I suppose it leads me into my next point, which is around apprenticeships. And I appreciate you've touched on this already. And it's great to hear, obviously, your own drive and your own work on increasing apprenticeships. One of the things that I suppose at this time of the year in particular that I'm sure all our constituency offices get is students who are struggling to get an apprenticeship and struggling to get in to secure obviously then their place in college and so on. So I'm keen to understand, you've mentioned a bit about apprenticeships with some larger companies and upscaling that and stuff, but for a company who might want to employ maybe one apprentice, two apprentices, and those small numbers, how do you feel from the evidence that you've gathered and from your own expertise, how do you feel that can be done better to enable those SMEs to be part of that process and actually to have, I suppose, the real local input, that they have the local knowledge and ultimately the jobs that those young people who are learning those skills can come out and go into employment? I'm really keen to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in other committee members, but initially I'm going to just give me my own observation from looking at construction recently. Subcontracting has maybe been about the death of apprenticeships because somebody small that maybe has 2 people operating in their company doesn't have the time to look after apprenticeships. But that's where the overall developer and contractor could act as a parent. And I'm putting parent in inverted commas, parent to the smaller companies in helping them both with that tremendous amount of paperwork, some of which I know is necessary, some of which is doubtful, to bring on board an apprenticeship. And there's all the other support structures which need to be brought in for an apprenticeship, particularly people, getting to work in time, all those other skills. Suddenly somebody's working in North Belfast and the next week they're working in Coleraine and the young apprentice doesn't know how to get there. So there's a lot that can be done by the bigger companies in Northern Ireland to help the smaller companies. Now, do they need an incentive for that? Gordon?
Yeah, and I think this is a really powerful point that you've made, because it is the biggest challenge that we face, is getting the large number of smaller employers the support that they need. And some of it is about apprenticeships and ensuring we have better structures and the larger companies step in to support. But some of it is also that a lot of young people don't need a full apprenticeship to get themselves into work. It's looking at these other programs that have been operating, like Skill Up and Step Up, that are really successful, that are short programs to give an initial skill level that means the young person can get a job and then begin an apprenticeship. So we need to look at other routes in addition to apprenticeships. I think the apprenticeship that model is always going to be the key and the important one, but ultimately, because there's such a high percentage of young people that currently don't have access to a full apprenticeship, and as you quite rightly say, they're applying for apprenticeships and being unsuccessful, we need a good one-stop shop available to them through the career service or wherever that sits, that they know they can go for advice and say, I can't get an apprenticeship, what is a programme that's suitable for me? And the department have lots of good programmes running in collaboration with the local colleges right across the regions. So I think that there's other routes other than apprenticeships to help people get, I'll use the word, to get a kick start to their career, to then facilitate the ability to go into an apprenticeship. And just one final point, still too many young people are being steered in the direction of a degree when it's not the appropriate route for them. And we need the careers advice in schools to be stronger and to be advising not only the young people but the parents about the other opportunities that are there beyond degrees. We still need significant numbers of people doing degrees, but too many still see that as the primary route. They go then get their degree, they can't get a place here, and then they go overseas and we don't get them back. It's much better if they look at an apprenticeship or an HLA route and they can eventually get their degree, but they stay here and they get employed at a much earlier stage.
Yeah, and this is exercised. Sorry.
And less debt.
And less debt. The higher level apprenticeships has been a real success in that. I'm going to bring in Deborah and Caroline, but one thing I find very, very sad is the fact that some apprenticeships and getting their apprenticeships is about knowing they're your cousin's child or something else, and it's about that equality of getting people into apprenticeships for the first time, and that is a real issue that we will be looking at as a council. I'm going to bring in both Deborah and Caroline on this one as well.
I mean, the point I would just like to encourage committee to think more broadly than just young people in terms of apprenticeships. The all-age apprenticeships were introduced in September 2023, and we have a real responsibility, I think, across Northern Ireland to make sure that people are employable at all stages in their lives. So skills are becoming, you know, the half-life of some of our skills is even shorter, and even in technology. So I think it's really important we're thinking about those routes and apprenticeships that focus on all stages of life, and that lifelong learning requirement to make sure they've got fulfilling roles. That's good for well-being, but it's very good for the economy. But it's also really important that we're really driving that to enable people to be curious and actually delivering in for their own personal well-being as well as delivering into the economy. So all-age apprenticeships, I think, are really important. The branding of apprenticeships also, I think, needs consideration, because there's lots of stereotypical views that come with that terminology too. So I think there's work to be done there, but accessibility and routes is critical.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, just from my experience in Wallace, just to lean into a couple of the questions there that you've asked around SMEs and their interest in apprenticeships, and also the careers advice as well alongside that. We run a programme, we've been running it now for 3 years, where 60 local employers, we call it our industry-based learning programme, so it's not work experience. In terms of inclusivity, my view on work experience is that young people who have parents who know people tend to get good work experience, and those who don't get good work experience, and it's often in lower sixth, which in an 11 to 18 school, which from my perspective is too late. So just at the point where young people are making decisions about level 2 to level 3 qualifications, all 180 of our young people go onto a portal which we have internally with 60 employers. They choose a career area that they think they're interested in, and then we do some preparation work with them about the sorts of skills that they'll develop over a 3 to 5 day period, and then they do some work when they return about reflecting on those skills and how transferable they are. And we use the term transversal skills in Wallace, and young people understand those. On the back of that, a number of SMEs have developed individualised apprenticeship programmes because they have got to know a young person. And in Northern Ireland, I think we often talk a lot about systems and processes, but actually connections and knowing people and getting to know a young person even over a week. And you think, right, I'm going to keep in contact with you. Will you work for me over the summer? And then suddenly there's an apprenticeship at the end of it. So small scale, really to underpin what Gordon said, I find very helpful, and often from that a snowball effect can then go forward. But there's lots of things I'm sure like that happening around Northern Ireland. It's just a way of trying to audit them and find out.
There's good practice happening. I mean, if you look at your own Bishopsgate Hotel and the work they're doing, which is not necessarily technical apprenticeships, but it's really, really high quality training, and anybody who's been there will realise the quality of service that's there. They realise there's training behind that, and I suppose it's getting companies to invest in that training. The employment market as it is means that companies are knocking down doors to try and get people on board, but the apprenticeship route is still an issue.
Yeah, no, certainly. And I suppose, you know, it would be remiss of us not to touch on the fact that so many schools are having to hold on to young people because they're funded per place as well. So I think there's, obviously we've had that conversation in committee before, but I think that it is something going forward that, you know, the Department of Education really need to address, because it is really holding up this whole conversation and what we can do. So I think that's important. I totally take on the point as well about, you know, apprenticeships and upskilling not just being for young people. I think that's a really important point. One of the other things that I noticed in your report, I think it's page 54. So you talk about education and social work, and about, I suppose, a lack of training as such in terms of leadership and management, and some of the barriers to that. So just on that, Kathleen, you and I obviously both come from an education background, so we know how hectic schools are at the best of times, and social work, I'm sure, the same. So I mean, my own impression would be that for a lot of people in that sector, it's probably simply that they don't have the time to do those courses. They don't have the opportunity to do those courses because work is so intensive for them. But I was wondering, do you have any further sort of analysis on why there seems to be that lack of leadership? And we know, I mean, in both education and in social work, the skills are there, the ability's there, but in terms of, you've identified obviously that lack of, I suppose, actual qualification in that. So it's to see why that's happening and how we can address that to make sure that those skills are available right across, because those are obviously two key sectors in our workforce, and it's something that we need to take very seriously.
I think there's a real dearth of leadership and management training right across different sectors, and I think it's probably the economic squeeze that happened. I remember when I first went into a position of leadership, there was like a choice of about 5-6 different courses, and some of that was civic leadership as well. There was common purpose, there was MBAs, there was PQHs, there was whatever. There's none of that in education, but there's also a dearth of that in other sectors. So I live in Newry now, and I look at the productivity, the Republic of Ireland in comparison to us, and I look at the number of people who are travelling from north to south. So the productivity has nothing to do with the workers, because the workers are travelling north-south, but there is a different system in how we look at leadership and management and how we actually put a premium on that. And I think we need to build leadership and management training right across the whole region in all sectors. Now, big companies are doing it, which is why they're doing well. Smaller companies don't see the point in that. But if you look at the very useful bit, and we've had a conversation with it, what the Farmers Union did during COVID was, bring farmers together, and they were looking at sustainability and everything else, and they were building leadership among agriculture and the farming communities. Deborah will know a lot about this one, but other sectors aren't necessarily doing the same, and I think this is where the political people can actually take the lead in making sure that there's encouraging leadership and management training and civic leadership right across the region.
Thank you. And I suppose brings me on to my last point, which is just around the skill-up programs as well. So obviously they've been essential in upskilling and actually allowing for that continuous professional development as well. And I suppose, are you identifying gaps in the market that potentially already could correlate with the skill-up courses, and how do you feel that, I suppose, your strategy interact with that?
Well, one of the gaps, I suppose, in a market is IT. And do you want to say something about that, Lorna, just in the whole inclusion aspect? Because we have built computing and software companies here, and they don't have enough workers. But then beyond that, there's a real lack of digital skills.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I think the skill up programs in particular around digital skills will be hugely important to address. And just leading on from the apprenticeships, I come from an organisation where we don't use apprenticeships, but we brought in over 100 people through digital skills academies because they're hugely successful. And the people coming through those academies is right across the regions, Northwest, Fermanagh, all sorts of people coming through those academies, and all from very different backgrounds. So the skill up programs are very important, but I think all of these programs are all successful, but I think the one thing we're missing is collaboration, and where organisations all come together to use those academies, and that it's not just for the large organisations in our regions. So the skill up programs, we'll be looking at everything right across all of that digital skills piece.
Listen, thank you very much. That's really useful, and obviously the start of a conversation. So we'll hope to continue the engagement with you in the future. Thank you.
David.
Thank you, Kathy. Good to see you again. And good to see Deborah and from Wallace here as well. And thank you. Actually, I was going to tease out apprenticeships, but you've just answered everything there really, really well. So there's no point doing that. But what we often, or I often as well, 91% of our companies here are small, under 10 employees, but yet it only makes up 36% of the jobs in the thing. And there's not a correlation between the amount of the jobs that are there and the number of businesses, if you like. But how do we, and that'll be a wide range of everything there. How do we bring the skills to that 36 to grow that 36% of jobs in that area of the economy? But yet, is there a benefit still of focusing on certain areas? If that makes sense. So it's a really wide base, but is the benefit in the skills really wide, or is the benefit in choosing a couple of areas? You've named a couple of them already, and focusing on that and providing opportunities to create something more in the future.
I think it is so wide, the landscape of skills. I think our first year was, we had to get to grips with this landscape, which we're constantly getting to grips with. But the whole idea of skills growth and the partners in that skills growth, it's holding them to account. Yeah. And I think FE have a very strong place in the growth of skills in Northern Ireland. We have fantastic infrastructure, fantastic resources in our FE colleges, but maybe, FE colleges, like schools, like everything else, need to change in their agility to do those skills in short-term courses in conjunction with companies, as well as the long-term courses. Not every course has to be September to May. And I think educational institutions need to all change with that in mind. And education is not over when you think it's over. It's only beginning, because we will all know that we need to skill up constantly, whether we're on a skill up program or not. We need to skill up constantly, and there's a role where government, where FE, training organisations have to partner with SMEs. But it's hard to partner with an SME, but it isn't as hard to partner with a cluster of SMEs. And if you look at how they clustered schools together in early learning communities, you could very easily cluster SMEs together like that. I'm not sure if anybody, Lorna?
Yeah, I think the work, for instance, that Software NI has done is really, really powerful, because it started with large organisations, but it's actually made up of startups, SMEs, all coming together to understand how we can, in the large companies, can support the smaller organisations to grow. And that's what that software sector is doing. If we can replicate that across some of our other key sectors, to do something quite similar, where there's more collaboration and more coming together to use the programmes that's out there, the skill-up programmes or whatever it might be, but we do it in a collective manner. But I think the work that Software NI's done has been a really good basis to look at how we can do that and replicate that in other sectors.
Sorry, the business landscape, as you've pointed out, it is family businesses, it's SMEs, and there isn't scale and structure. And I think one, leadership and management comes through as something that collaboration would be really helpful. And I think we end up talking an awful lot about the skills we're missing today, but the real power will be helping those smaller employers and those family businesses understand what are the skills that they need tomorrow, because they're not thinking about that in the current environment where you've got unemployment at less than 2%. I think what we've been doing as a skills council is working with some of those business groups, because harnessing some of those, the CBI, the FSB, the Chambers of Commerce as well, has been really important in getting some of those key pain points fed into us, and then thinking about what are we doing to help project the future, not necessarily address the problems of today. And I think that's potentially the best route for small businesses to come in through, to really sort of, for us to be able to turn some of that into sort of policy influence and action as well.
Yeah, okay. The flip of that stat of 91% is 36% of our population work in 2% of our businesses. So it's the skill. But the thing with reading through the paper caught my eye was 64% of employers anticipate they'll need to upskill next year. But when you look at last year, it was 64%. So that means there's there's no increase in the employers wanting it. And where's the barrier to that? So is the barrier, and you've mentioned that, reforming kind of how it's delivered, if you like, or what. But my question's kind of, is it is it what has been offered doesn't allow this to grow, or is it the timescales, or is it not focused on the areas that the businesses, exactly what you're saying, you know, what we need next year, the year after, 5 years, 10 years, and we're still doing stuff that was, you know, we've always done, if you like.
Well, both, you know, sometimes educational institutions are slightly elitist. I say that as poacher turned gamekeeper, but you know, and the fact that they decide this is what should happen, as opposed to bringing in business, other key stakeholders, and saying, okay, what do you need? And for a long-term education system, you can't be preparing simply for a job or a skill, because some people are changing greatly, and there's other raison d'etres for someone's education. But for short-time agile upskilling, I mean, I'm hearing back from employers to say this has been taught, but we no longer use this. You know, this is not relevant anymore. And part of our role in the Skills Council is to feed that back, because FE are part of the Skills Council as well. So there's no point somebody being taught, you know, how to use a theodolite in a particular way when it's something else is simply being used. You know, there are different systems to do things, and education and training has to keep up with the industry. But industry also, the beauty is somewhere in between. Industry also has to give the time to say that they are as much part of the education as the educators and the trainers, and to make sure that and there's some very successful examples of that happening in FE colleges at the minute, where people are maybe employed in industry for 3 days a week and employed as trainers in FE colleges for 2 days a week. Now that is bringing the very best practice together, but that is not happening everywhere. And where that is not happening, some of the training is not up to date.
I just finally, I've mentioned technical universities a couple of times in the chamber, and is that a model that's ever been looked at, or you have ever looked at, taking the FE colleges and taking them up to the technical university model that you see across Europe, other parts of Europe?
That is exactly on our agenda for next year, to visit I've already been to the Atlantic one, and I know the great collaboration between them and the Northwest, and Leo Murphy sits on the Skills Council, but we're also looking at the technical colleges. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything on that, but there's also training organisations within big companies at the minute, and we're also looking at those.
Yeah. If I can come in, I have an interest in FE and FE in HE as well, because I'm chair of Education Committee at CERC, and so have an understanding of this as well. I think there is a lack of understanding about the HE opportunities in FE in Northern Ireland, and I think some of the things that we already have in Northern Ireland are not widely understood. One good thing perhaps this year is the introduction of a UCAS pilot, which I know FE isn't entirely satisfied that's going to be successful, but 2 of the colleges are going to be involved in that. So I think that's a step forward in terms of status. And I think that sense of status, and then the incentivisation of skills through qualifications and education is going to be important in all of that. So if we are an education, without getting into a philosophical argument about the purpose of education, but I mean, education in Northern Ireland is generally measured by the success of the qualifications that the young people who pass through whatever institution it is that they're in. And unless we can incentivise somehow through qualifications the assessment, or at least the valorisation of skills, then there is going to be somewhat of a cul-de-sac. And that's something I'd like to get into with this look at levels 3 to level 6.
Brilliant, Deborah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. David, Sinead?
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation and for the panel coming here today. And you have such a massive remit, and sometimes where do you start with skills? But in the programme for government, there was no headline target or measures of success in skills, but it did talk about the Skills Fund and the Skills Academy. But by the end of this mandate, I'm really no clear what success looks like. Are you?
We will be more aware of the system of travel skills. Are mentioned 16 times in the programme for government. We're very grateful that it is written large there, and we will be responding to the programme for government in the consultation time. I suppose it has been completely different than, for example, the Scottish model and other models where there are no targets. But in this case, if skills are there and then targets come from that, we've already seen quite a bit of action on skills. And I would be confident that each of these committees will bring forward an action plan, and that advice, if it's taken, there will be targets then put in place. I would like to see a development of the Skills Council, not just as a body that gives advice, but then as a body that monitors action. Because after you give advice, you do want to go back and look at the monitoring of that advice. And I would see that as, haven't discussed that yet with the department, but I would see that as a natural outworkings of our committee, that we would be monitoring action. And we are independent by nature, even though we were appointed by DFE. We are independent. We don't represent a department as such. We are there to bring about the very best in skills in Northern Ireland. So once we get action from this, and the action hopefully leading from some of our advice, then we would like the opportunity to hold that advice and the outworkings of it to account. It is a big landscape. You can't move forward all at the same time. Like, I'm going after this to the launch of the Challenge Fund. So, you know, there will be a number of things that we would like to see in the next year, and then, you know, in a 3-year plan as part of this mandate. But if nothing is happening, you'll probably be hearing more from the Skills Council.
If I may, Chair, just add a few points, because I think it's a really good question. And I think there are a number of, if you like, measures that are already in place that we can be assessed against. I mentioned earlier, for example, number of females into STEM. You know, so there's a very strong measure there. We'd want to see that improving. The number of people with disabilities, the number of people that are qualified to level 2 or less. There's figures for all of those. And certainly our measures of success is to drive all those numbers in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. You know, it's okay being in an advisory role. I often give quite a lot of advice to people, and if they don't listen to it, you know, it goes nowhere. So it's really important that you can monitor where that advice is going, and what kind of actions go before it, and what kind of measurements and targets, and then you know what success looks like. Yeah. So it's really important, because, you know, you don't want to be an advisory committee without any teeth at all, because, you know, if there's a lot of good work and a lot of data collection and a lot of measures that are there, you want to be able to ensure that you can track them to see success. And you did mention in your briefing about the lessons from the Scottish Skills Agency and the SkillNet Agency. Can you maybe widen that? What are the lessons that you're learning from those agencies that you can take forward and advise the department that these are necessary frameworks in order to monitor and track success?
That work has just begun. Us looking at both the Scottish model and SkillNet in the Republic of Ireland, in setting up meetings with one of the regional meetings, and there will be a further meeting then with the head of SkillsNet in October. So we're looking at their model, because we know it is a preferred model from a lot of people, to look at the fact that they have an overall strategy, but then they have certain regional committees. And the Scottish model have a really good strategy, but we're looking at the outworkings of that. We're very aware when looking at the two models, they may not necessarily fit here, but we'll be able to take lessons. But one of the key lessons to begin with is the fact that they have an overall strategy, and that is the umbrella from which everything else leads. So therefore you bring about a far less fragmented approach, both in Scotland and the Republic of Ireland.
Okay, and then in March, the Minister asked you to advise his department in relation to his 4 key priorities. It's been asked before, but what was your advice on regional balance, and what input have you had into the sub-regional economic plans?
Well, we met with, the 4 of us met with the Minister in Danks Bank, and we fed into it. But bear in mind, at that stage, we were only in early formation time, and I think that relationship with advice is being built. I would say a proper conduit for giving that advice still has to be in place, but we started to look at the regional differences in Northern Ireland, but that was from us only starting on our journey of looking at the different regions and going to them, because my idea of what was happening in the Northwest was historic. Until I went to the Springtown campus, my idea of what was happening in the Southwest was completely different when I went to companies like NSERC and I looked at FE, etc. So there's a lot of legwork that has to be done in getting that real-time look at business and the key stakeholders, and I think that's something that we constantly bring back to the Minister, the advice that we have both in our reports and face to face.
And how are you getting the data in relation to regional balance, regional imbalance or disparities, and how is that data then, informing you in order to give your advice back to the Minister, so what interventions need to take place in certain areas in order to grow productivity and to close the gaps and make sure that that there's an inclusive regional investment in skills.
We are extremely well supported by the Secretariat in the department, who give us up-to-date labour supply data, but also regional data as well as that's complemented by visits to those areas, and each of the subcommittees will have people on the ground from different regions who are able to bring that voice as well, because there's the lessons from the data, but there's also the necessary bits in between from people who are from Fermanagh or from somewhere else who bring their own their own story of their own region. My thinking on the Northwest had been slightly outdated, particularly in looking at student numbers and how those student numbers fitted into skills, etc. And we have people on our committee who work in economic policy, for example, and data, and are maybe better at crunching the numbers than the rest of us, but they do that for us. Because you will realise from around the room today, we have people from different specialisms, and that's what's needed.
Will you commit to come back to the committee and give us your assessment on your regional skills advice to the department? And one small final question, please. In terms of migration, you referenced it in your opening statement. Could you expand that a little bit to the committee?
I have to say this was something that was felt very greatly around the council table, the effects of migration on the current UK migration policy, which we realise is not a devolved issue, on the workers in Northern Ireland, and particularly in speaking to healthcare agency, which I know is part of the all-party skills group. Real challenge and something you're focusing on. So with that in mind, we have looked at the current situation and the fact that it's not a devolved issue, but the fact that we live on the edge of the EU. We live as part of UK region. So, there's advantages there and disadvantages. And also the current pay gaps as well are a huge disadvantage to having workers into Northern Ireland. with that in mind, we had set up as a committee a meeting with the MAC, Migration Advisory Committee, our council, in June, but we thought best to cancel that because it was on the eve of the election. So that is actually rescheduled now for October, where we'll be looking at current migration policy, and that was part of our meeting with the Minister, and we note that that was part of the discussion between the Irish Taoiseach and the British Prime Minister during their meeting at the weekend, because it is a real issue, because a lot of people work both sides of the border, and a lot of them don't realise the implications of that. And we have particularly issues with young people, with students, a less number of students now studying in the Republic of Ireland because of different policies. So it's something we will tease out and we will be advising. I realise it's probably not a topic that is necessarily popular with everyone at the minute, but we're hearing from particularly healthcare agencies, from a number of other agencies, hotel, hospitality, who are really, really hit by the current UK migration policy and the fact that there appears to be no wriggle room for counties and a region which is on the edge of Europe.
You, Philip?
Thanks very much. Kind of following on from the issue of migration, or linking into it, Gordon in his presentation talked about the potential within green skills and the green economy of an additional 58,000 jobs over the next 10 years on top of the 105 currently employed. So I'm just wondering, because you then talked about we're sitting at full employment. Yeah. So in terms of those 58,000 jobs, if we're to achieve that figure, where do they come from? I mean, economic inactivity, I don't think is going to solve it, although it could help it. Is it the case that those jobs are coming from other sectors, maybe within the carbon-intensive sectors, or will that additional 58,000 jobs impact negatively on the employment in other sectors? And I was going to build in then the issue of migration to it, but if I could maybe answer that first question, Gordon.
Yeah, and you're partly answering the question by some of the comments that you're making on the way through. It is a range of the factors that you've talked about there. Economic activity won't solve it on its own, but in making improvements and reducing the numbers in that area and helping people get into employment is one aspect. Migration is the other aspect. The over 50s that have left the workforce that we need to encourage back with more flexible working. You know, COVID, an awful lot of people took major career decisions in COVID and are sitting there as part of the economic inactivity group, and they can be reskilled and retrained. There's also, if you take the renewable energy sector, replacing the fossil fuel sector, retraining of the people in the areas that are no longer going to provide employment, so reskilling. So we've identified it's in the region of about a dozen different things that need to happen, because it's about repositioning people to be ready for the jobs, but migration has to play a key part of it as well. We're not going to be able to achieve this without an improvement in immigration policies. And healthcare has been the manufacturing sector has been decimated in Northern Ireland because of not being able to get the people that they need. My own organisation takes us 9 months to get somebody processed, a skilled IT person that we can't get in this part of the world, that we maybe need to bring in from India. It's a 9 months journey before we can get that person here and working. So there's a whole raft of factors that all need to be fixed to make this happen. Yeah. And keeping more of our young people as well. You know, too many of our young people going to universities and just not coming back.
Okay, and I mean, obviously, it's important that there's a just transition towards realising the new. So, I mean, skills and transfer of skills is vitally important. So, I mean, is that a key factor of the work that you're doing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And there's always a good side when there's a cloud. The good side in this, as I said to a group of apprentices I spoke to recently, that it's an employees market. wages are going up in Northern Ireland, and you know, for them, they have their pick maybe of 2-3 jobs. So there's a good side for young people. We can't forget about those people who are economically inactive, and we have to do as much as we can to get them back into employment. For 35 years of my life, I worked in areas with high unemployment, with people with third generation who hadn't been ever in work, and we have to address that culture, because once you address that culture with a young person, with an older person, you address that for the generations to come. And I wouldn't like us to see as a nation the fact that we would forget about those people who were not in education, employment and training. There is a need, like everything in Northern Ireland, to go back and get them. But that isn't easy work.
It isn't easy work. Good luck to all of you in the work that you're doing, and thanks very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, panel, and that leads neatly on to where my points will be. Firstly, a very professional presentation and detailed answers, which is appreciated, so it's good to hear from industry-specific professionals in that regard. Totally agree with the commentary around apprenticeships. I think, to be honest with you, it's been quite disjointed for some time, and I think there needs to be a holistic overview of how we administer apprenticeships in this country, because to date we still have a situation where mothers and fathers are running around trying to find somebody to take on an apprentice, and it's not appropriate for the modern age that we live in. And essentially the culture is that if you're in the know, you get a job, and if you're not, you fall behind. And I think that needs to change. There needs to be, I think it was Gordon, a one-stop shop where we can go collectively to a portal to find out specific criteria. I was very interested to hear what was happening in the school in relation to trying to funnel people earlier so that there is a potential apprenticeship
Nicely checked. Nicely checked.
Johnson. I'll WhatsApp it to you.
Okay, colleagues, we'll now move on to. Okay, colleagues, I'm just going to ask Peter to give a summary of agreed actions. Peter.
So, Chairperson, is the committee content to write to the Skills Council, obviously thanking them for their briefing, but also seeking sight of their Green Skills Action Plan and Digital Action Plan, also seeking sight of their regional imbalance advice, which they're going to provide to the department, if that is agreed?
Content, members?
Yeah. Also, do you also want to write to the department and seek sight of the second monitoring support on the skills strategy?
Yes.
Great, okay, that's grand. That's, I can't think of anything else.
Chair, just on that site of the second report, I'm kind of, I didn't want to just raise it with the council there, but it's the nature of their independence. You know, they developed a monitoring report, they sent it to the department, and it went nowhere since March because the department wanted to align it to their mission, and that concerns me because the value in the council is their independence and their advisory role, and just where we can take that and develop it, that it becomes more meaningful than that. So I think that we need to ask that question as well. From the department, why did they pause it?
Is that agreed, Chairperson?
Agreed.
Okay, will do.
Okay, members will then move to item number 6, which is departmental oral and written briefing on the October monitoring ride and update on financial position.
Give me these pages.
Sorry, thank you. I got paper milk. Morning, colleagues. And apologies for keeping you waiting. Thank you for making yourself available. In the interest of time, I'll just hand straight over to you if you are content.
Thank you, Chair. I'm joined by my colleague Niamh McGarvey to update members on the Department for the Economy's 24-25 budget. The paper members have in front of them this morning summarises my department's response to the DOF commissioned information gathering exercise. To complete this work with up-to-date figures, it was necessary to complete October monitoring, even though this has not yet been commissioned by DOF. The paper therefore also covers the proposed October monitoring round return, which will be submitted to DOF once requested. As members will be aware, the monitoring exercise, which typically occurs 3 times a year, allows the Executive to realign its budget allocation based on emerging needs. The paper therefore details changes to the DFE 24-25 allocation due to internal reallocations, bids to the Executive for additional funding and reduced requirements. I will briefly summarise the headline figures. It is anticipated that the DFE 24-25 non-ring-fenced resource DEL budget will decrease by 1.1 million, from 800 million to 799 million, as a result of a 1 million reduced requirement, net reduction from agreed budget transfers between departments, and a 0.1 million reduction due to a consolidated fund extra receipt. It is anticipated that the DFE 24-25 capital DEL budget will decrease by circa 4 million due to reduced requirements in earmarked inclusive future fund and earmarked complementary funding. As departments can reallocate their non-earmarked resource and capital budgets to meet emerging pressures without recourse to DOF, the paper also sets out changes to the internal budget allocations within DFE actioned as part of October monitoring. DFE has reallocated £4.4 million of non-ring-fenced resource DEL against pressures of 4.5 million. Whilst this has only resulted in a small increase in the overall overcommitment, the proportion relating to non-salary expenditure has continued to grow. To mitigate against the increase in the non-salary overcommitment, the 2 million of additional resource DEL allocated to the Department for the Economy at June monitoring has been used to reduce the overcommitment. However, the non-salary overcommitment remains high and is not reducing at the rate it has done in previous years. This, coupled with current unquantifiable pressures in both skills for life and work and apprenticeship programmes, has resulted in DFE declaring an £11.7 million pressure to DOF, £8.7 million to address the current non-salary overcommitment, and a further £3 million for skills for life and work and apprenticeships. I will update the committee if this position changes before October monitoring is submitted to the Department of Finance. There is only one proposed change to our ring-fenced resource DEL. DFE will submit a bid to DOF to access 1.8 million of centrally held peace programme match funding. Moving on to capital. Of the 12.6 million internal reduced requirements identified for October monitoring, 3.3 million was used to meet internal bids and 9.3 million to reduce the capital overcommitment to 3.5 million. At this stage of the financial year, this level of overcommitment is considered manageable within the overall departmental capital position. As there are £19.7 million of high priority capital bids relating to further and higher education, which the department cannot fund with inside its existing allocation, a bid will be submitted to DOF for this also. Whilst DOF has confirmed that no bids for ring-fence depreciation impairment can be made as part of October monitoring, DFE continues to report its £37 million pressure. Finally, DFE will also submit a £0.2 million bid for financial transactions capital due to Invest NI receipts being lower than anticipated. Chair, that is just a quick summary of October monitoring. In relation to the urgent in-year exercise, the 11.7 million resource DEL pressure was declared to DOF, along with additional information they requested on non-contractual salaries and expenditure on professional services and government communications. This information was included inside your briefing paper. In respect of October monitoring and the in-year urgent exercise, Niamh and I will do our best to answer any questions members might have and provide additional clarification. Where we cannot give you precise or complete answers on issues, we'll be happy to write to the clerk with the necessary explanations. And where a question is specific to a business area, we will ask our policy colleagues for a response.
And I thank you, as always, for their very detailed presentations. I just wanted to check. So yesterday, the Finance Minister said £750 million of pressures across executive departments. How much of that £750 then exists within the Department for the Economy?
11.7.
So 11.7 is all from the Department for the Economy. Does that then include or project any proposed additional spends that the current minister within the department may make between now and the end of the financial year? That
includes everything that would be in our forecast outturn to the rest of the financial year. So the 11.7 is the only pressures that we have.
And just in relation to FTC then, it's good that we're obviously making a bid to that. Is that the only one then that the department has made this year for FTC?
Yes, we will have ongoing, commitments in regards to FTC, which we got an allocation in the initial budget, and that's just a slight change in what the anticipated receipts were going to be.
That's all that I
We had a small easement in June monitoring for FTC, and now we have a small bid.
Okay, perfect. David?
Yeah, just very quickly, sit in the shared island and do a lot of that, and a lot of the cross-border bodies that you meet there all argue that their funding has essentially been frozen. And when it comes to Intertrade Ireland, is that the case?
Intertrade Ireland and Tourism Ireland are both our north-south bodies, and both of those have received the same funding as they did last year, and that's in line with what the ratios are.
Okay, so it has been frozen?
They received the same funding as last year.
Okay, and then how is that funding allocation assessed?
Sorry,
how is the amount that they're given? How is that assessed?
It's based on the ratios. So when they do their business plan, the agreed ratios would be applied against that, and that would be what we would pay over. And then there are jurisdictional expenditure as well that sits outside the ratios, which is would be a separate assessment done on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so when there's any assessment done, we're paying equal share than as the South. It's not been funded more.
Well, the ratios are set, and I think our share is 30, is 1/3, and theirs is 2/3, and that's the agreed ratios.
Okay.
But that's again based on their business plan, so we're meeting the share of the element that, you know, per the agreement that we should be.
100%. Thank you.
Gary?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Joanna, for the briefing. I suppose a quick question for me. Obviously, the Chair's highlighted the Finance Minister's mention of the pressures, and you've told us what that means to the Department for the Economy. In terms of the Transformation Board piece and the bids to that, was there not more scope to maybe, given obviously those pressures that do exist, to maybe put in further bids to that particular area, but also I suppose just in terms of general feedback, and maybe you can't answer this, but one of the key bids in there is around post-19 SEN provision, something that obviously a lot of us have an interest in as well. And is there any feedback in terms of where that's at?
We actually received feedback just on Monday afternoon, and the SEN, the post-19 SEN project, has actually moved forward to stage 2.
Okay.
So obviously officials will now be working to sort of look at that bid and to go on to that next stage. So that is actually good news in respect of that.
And in terms of wider bids, in terms of transformation, are any thoughts from the department as to the better use, I suppose, of the public money?
Well, there was obviously the other bid that went forward and it hasn't progressed, and I suppose they will be looking feedback on the reasons behind that. And then the other bid that wasn't is still under development is to do with the IT transformation in Outfit. So I think they're still looking at that, and obviously with a case management system, you know, that would be, you know, a considered a transformational project.
And Sinead?
I just note that the department will bid for capital of 15.7 million for HE and 4 million for FE. Can you give me a breakdown?
Yes. So the HE is in respect of the quality research. So quality research is funding that all universities receive, and that is to help them to compete with you know, competitive grants in respect of research. So our universities have worked out that based on, if they look at what the equivalent universities get, that they should get roughly around 20 million more than what they currently do. So they believe that they have a gap which makes, you know, impacts their competitiveness in regards to those research projects. So that's the gap, and that's that 15.7 million would bring them, would it would narrow that gap, because they did receive extra funding in the last monitoring round as well from our baseline.
What way is that broken up within FE, within the universities?
So that's for there's a formula that would be applied against that. I would need the policy area to provide that breakdown and how that's split across the universities. But it's to do with that there is a particular formula around that quality research. In respect of FE, that is additional projects that they could do across their minor works programmes, you know, across their various estates.
Would it be possible to give that breakdown between the universities or the institutions in relation to the research piece? Thank you.
Okay, and I just wanted one. Oh, sorry, Philip. Yeah.
Just a wee quick question on the pressures, the 11.7 million. Those are the issues identified in Appendix 4 of the presentation. Am I right in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are. Appendix 4 is really a summary of the position, sort of setting it out where we were at June monitoring and then what has happened since that. So that was the information gathering. The detail on what that sort of where came from would probably be in your Appendix 1, which shows you know, the movement and the overcommitment and, you know, the things that were carried out as part of the recent exercise.
And, I mean, you expect to get the 11.7 million, and if you don't, what happens?
Well, that'll be a decision for the minister, you know, on what, looking at what can be stopped or what is scalable. So that will be a decision there.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And I just wanted to be clear. So you did confirm that all what anticipated future spending within this financial year by the minister, either announced or soon to be announced, is included within these figures?
Yes. The only other pressure that we have flagged to DOF, and it was included with inside the briefing, is around FE pay.
Yes.
You know, and obviously pay awards are outstanding. So if anything, you know, negotiation-wise happens there, that obviously results in a further pressure. But again, the FE colleges are the employers, so that rests with them.
So any announcement that the Minister may make today, this week, or in coming weeks in relation to the expansion of McGee has already been included within these figures?
It has.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else, anything? If not, colleagues, thank you as always for your presentations and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just referring to the department about the breakdown in the universities.
Okay, and just to agree, members, Peter, if you're content.
Chairperson's committee content to write to the department just seeking the breakdown between the universities of the capital bid around the equality research support for further information on that. If that is agreed, Chairperson.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Lovely, Margaret.
Move to item. Yes.
Well, just very briefly, see, Joanna had mentioned just about stage 2 in terms of the post-19 skills stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't just pick up exactly what stage 2 was. Did anybody else?
No, I don't know what stage
Could
2
we
is. Should we write
Could we ask that
Yeah,
just in
okay.
terms of what
Yeah.
the next? It's a key issue, and there's a huge campaign in relation to it as well. It
Yeah.
affects a lot of our constituents.
Yes, I'm sure they
All right.
Okay, colleagues, we'll now move to item 7.
Sorry, I think Sinead had
Oh,
something.
sorry, Sinead.
Hi,
Sorry.
Chair.
No, my fault.
I'm just kind of thinking this out. Obviously, there has been money underspent in relation to Fort George.
Yeah.
And I suppose, could we write to the department to see where that project now sits as a result of that money not being able to be spent? And what are they doing to ensure that in the next iteration that money can be spent? So how are they overcoming the barriers to spend that money?
Great. Great. Thank you. Okay, members, item number 7 then, the Financial Provisions Bill. The committee will now receive oral evidence from the department on relevant aspects of the Financial Provisions Bill. This evidence session will be recorded by Hansard. Colleagues, you're all very welcome, and I'll just hand over to you to brief the committee on the relevant aspects of the bill for our consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning by 2 minutes.
Yes.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to come and brief you today. We want to tell you about our proposals in the planned Financial Provisions Bill and the responses to the recent consultation which we ran. We're keen to hear your views, and as we've previously shared written information with you, to hear any comments you'd like to share with us. The Department of Finance has invited departments to consider matters that may be suitable for inclusion in the planned Financial Provisions Bill, which is in the 2024 legislative programme. DFE identified 5 proposals which were outlined in the consultation document, namely strengthening our powers of financial assistance, which would, amongst other matters, permit the department to use financial transactions capital, revision to fees in relation to aspects of tourism NI's work, the power for DFE to form companies, amendment to DOF approvals in respect of training and apprenticeships, and the handling of smaller departmental accounts. The proposals were primarily developed in response to NIAO comments or were to address historical deficits in legislation. What we were seeking to do was to ensure that DFE was equipped via legislation for issues that face the department today and were within the constraints of such a bill. Bearing in mind the earlier financial update that you heard, it would be appropriate to clarify that there are no financial impacts associated with this legislation. The legislation will, amongst other things, enhance the department's power to provide financial assistance, but the power is discretionary and will be managed in accordance with guidance which takes account of departmental allocations and established budgetary limits. The report on the consultation will be published in the coming weeks, but we wanted to meet with you as you requested to give you feedback on the consultation prior to publishing it. There is more detail in the written brief which we shared with you previously. We engaged in advance of the consultation period for some time with key partners to test the proposals, potential legislative solutions, and to raise awareness of our consultation. We also met with the NIAO. You will have the document summarising responses to the consultation. With the exception of one response from an individual, the responses indicated support for the proposals and/or offered comments or questions on specific aspects of the proposals. The consultation and the engagement with NIAO do not yet indicate material areas for revision to our proposed approach, and we expect to put these, together with the view of the committee, to the Minister in seeking a final decision on what to put forward to DOF for inclusion in this bill. As the bill is led by DOF, its final content and the timing of the introduction of the bill will be a matter for them and subject to executive approval. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have for us today.
Members, do we have any questions on this one? No, I think at this stage members seem relatively content. Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much for that. So Peter will have nothing to agree at this stage.
I think the department may be looking for a formal response just on the consultation, so I can just indicate then that the committee is currently content with the provisions within the bill.
Okay. Members, before we move on to item 8, are we content that if we just have some members had indicated they just wanted to use the bathroom, so if we could just take a 5-minute recess?
Good job. Thank you.
Very good. 12:05.
Just push the button there, Michael. Yeah. Thank you. In case members make any remarks on the microphone.
Committee Room 30. Sound. 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 Committee Room 30, 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 sound.
Okay, colleagues, we now move to item 8 of our Agenda SL1 Renewable Heat Incentive tariffs. I wish to advise members that the committee will now receive an oral evidence from the department on a proposed statutory rule relating to RHI tariffs. I wish to refer members to the clerk's covering note at page 301 and also refer members to the following: the departmental briefing paper at page 303. Further information on the tariff has been tabled. Previous correspondence from the committee on this issue at page 306, and a copy of the Minister's statement on the closure of RHI at page 311. At this stage, I wish to welcome back our colleagues from the department: Sarah Brady, Director, Energy Operations, Department for the Economy; Peter Neal, Head of Policy and Legislation Branch at the department, and that's it. No problem at all. Colleagues, you're very welcome back to committee, and I will hand over to you at this stage.
Okay, thank you very much, committee. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today on the proposed regulations to uplift the RHI tariff for small and medium biomass boilers. As you said, I'm Sarah. You've met me before. Sarah Brady, Director of Energy Operations, and my colleague Peter Neal, who is the Head of RHI Policy. Just for a bit of background, on the 30th of July 2024, the Executive agreed on the closure of the non-domestic RHI scheme. And as an interim step to closure, they also agreed to the introduction of regulations to introduce an appropriate tariff for small and medium biomass installations. Following the review of the small and medium biomass tariff in 2019, the Department brought forward legislation which introduced a new tariff structure and new tariff rates. Following the introduction of that 2019 tariff, significant price fluctuations between the cost of biomass and the cost of the alternative fuel meant that the 2019 tariff was no longer appropriate. In 2021, the Department then consulted on the future of the scheme, noting that the preferred option, the Executive's preferred option, was to close the scheme. However, no decision on the future of the scheme, be that for either for tariff uplift or for scheme closure, was taken by the Executive prior to the resignation of the First Minister in February 2022. The next most significant milestone, as you might call it, in the RHI journey was the February 2023 Court of Appeal decision, which upheld the Department's ability to change tariffs, because that's what was in question. Can the Department change the tariffs at all? So that Court of Appeal upheld the Department's ability to change and revise tariffs. However, the decision of the Court noted that a proper permanent solution which balances the participants' needs with the needs of the taxpayer would be sought in months, not years. So a proper permanent solution which properly balances the needs of the participant with the needs of the taxpayer. Following that, the Executive returned in February 2024, and at the end of June they agreed through urgent procedure mechanism to close the scheme and to have a tariff uplift as an interim step towards closure. The draft regulations that we've brought before you, which we're bringing before the Assembly, will do just that. They will introduce what we see as a proper tariff for the small and medium biomass boilers, which is fair to participants and fair to the taxpayer. And I'm very happy to take your questions.
Thank you for that, Sarah. So just in relation to that and the Court's ruling that there needed to be a tariff that met the balance both of the public finances but also of legitimate expectation of the scheme holders, how did we come to the figure that we arrived at?
We did a lot of work, as you can imagine. There were a number of things taken into consideration. There were capital costs and the capital costs and the maintenance costs of the boiler, which we were able to get because we had 100% inspection rates, so we know they're accurate. And we also tracked the fuel price differential over 3 years and modelled that, so that gave us good information, good factual information on the fuel price differential. And then we modelled that with an aim to produce a rate of return, a prospective rate of return for the participants, which was in line with the state aid approval, the original state aid approval for the scheme.
And have you had any responses to these proposed figures at this stage from interested parties, or is this the first time that this proposed uplift has been made public?
This will be the first time that interested parties will have had seen the figures, the actual number. Yes.
Okay. And so this will then come in November, if agreed by the Assembly. This would then come into force from November. What about then that period between November 24 and since the court ruling that there needed to be a solution put in place? That would just remain what it currently is that right? Okay. And when was that ruling made?
That ruling was made in February 2023.
And the court ruling was months, not years?
That is correct.
So November 23 to November 24. Okay.
Understand that.
Yeah, no, of course. I just wanted to check that. And then in relation to the proposed closure of the scheme, this will be separate legislation that the Assembly will then have to scrutinise, debate and agree.
That's correct.
Okay. That's all that I have from myself. Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming before the committee. I suppose there's quite a history with all of this, which for many new members there's a lot of moving parts that we have to try to get our heads over, and particularly differentiate between the two issues, between what's before us today in terms of revised tariff and the closure. We can have thoughts and views on all of those. I suppose probably primary concern for me is due process, and do have some concern that this is the first time that interested parties would essentially be seeing what that revised tariff looks like, because I take on board the legal point of view as to the balance has to be got right between participants and the taxpayer. So just going very much back into where things were. So obviously the scheme suspended in February 2016, projected overspend of was it 140 million over 5 years. Changes were then made, which resulted then in a return of 26 million to the Treasury underspend. Yes. So the department, from previous correspondence and representation at the committee, before Ofgem announced that they were withdrawing from administrating the scheme, talked in the manner that they had a business case already before the executive as to what a revised tariff would look like. Is this the same business case? Is it the same findings, the same level of revised tariff that was in that business case as to what will be presented today?
Obviously adjusted by inflation, but yes, the business case after the 2023 tariff, after the 2023 Court of Appeal hearing, we prepared the business case, and it went to the Department of Finance in November 2023, and following that the executive came back in February, which obviously meant then that a decision like this was only right that it went to the executive. Well, it would always have had to go to the executive when they come back. So after the executive came back in February, we got them the papers in spring this year. February 2024 they come back, mixing the 23s and 24s. So after they come back in February this year, we got them the papers then in spring this year, and they were able to make the decision in June, which has allowed us to come to you today, which is, you know, we're trying to get here with the uplift as quickly as we could. Now obviously from November to now inflation has been added.
Okay. I received a few emails on this, but there was one which talked obviously about a public consultation in 2021 in relation to the nature of the scheme, looking at a way forward. So 400 responses submitted and 4 options were proposed in that consultation, 2 at which we're keeping the scheme open and 2 for closure. The report, to my understanding in terms of the email that I have read, is still unpublished. Is there a reason for that?
The intention generally with consultations of that nature is that you would publish a report in the consultation when you're publishing your decision, so that you can show, you know, that. So that continues to be our intention. We will publish a report on that consultation when we've got decisions which we can put out with that.
Do you not think it would be useful to our committee to scrutinise the response of the consultation before you would come before the committee seeking its view as to what the revised tariff that you would propose on the table. My simple mind operates in a manner that I think I would like to see what the thoughts and views of those genuine participants and those involved in the sector have, rather than rush towards a potential revised tariff which may well be challenged and maybe still not, in the eyes of participants, balance that participants' costs and impact versus taxpayer costs and impact, and it's about getting it right. So a lot of nervousness around due process on this. Does that concern you, and do you not think that we should have sight of that public consultation, which is now over 3 years?
What I can tell you is that the majority of responses to the public consultation did request that the scheme remain open, but however, they wanted the scheme to remain open at the 2012 tariff, which just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
So a very large proportion of responses saying keep the scheme open and put us back on our 2012 tariffs, please.
How would the revised tariff that you're proposing compare with counterparts in England, Scotland, Wales?
What the Cornwall report identified was that the actual structure of the scheme in Northern Ireland is so completely different from the structure of the scheme in GB that it's actually virtually impossible to compare, because there isn't a single tariff in GB. There's lots and lots of tariffs. It digressed over time and it reduced and it changed depending on what time participants joined. Whereas in Northern Ireland we didn't have that. The other big difference between ourselves and Britain is that in Northern Ireland the counterfactual fuel is kerosene. In Britain it's natural gas. So completely different. But that said, I do feel that this tariff, if you looked across the board in GB, you would say that it was fair, and you would see that it was the right tariff.
Would the revised tariff that you're aiming for still result in returned monies to Treasury in relation to the overall scheme?
It does, yes.
How not?
The revised tariff increases the annual cost of the scheme from around 5 million a year to around 15 million a year, so that's an increase of 10 million. And on current projections, now the AMI allowance does change from time to time because it's a demand-led scheme, but on current projections there would be in the region of 33 million available in AMI. So that difference between the 15 million and the 33 million, our intention, subject to Treasury approval, our intention would be that funding would be used for an alternative scheme which would deliver real benefits in terms of carbon savings.
And just to add that, sorry, quickly, sir, it's important to note that those are forecasts based on certain assumptions, so we can't, they are estimates. And secondly, any alternative use of the RHI budget will be subject to Treasury approval.
And final from me, so just to clarify, the reason for not having forward sight of the report to the committee or the public in general is what?
Our intention to publish the report would be to publish it when we've got firm decisions on the way forward on closure, and that would be our intention, and that's when we would be planning to do it. In addition to that, we have, with the resources we have had available, we've very much focused on the fact that we felt that, to quote Game of Thrones, winter is coming, and winter is the biggest usage period of time for the participants, and we very much wanted to try and get this tariff to them so that they get the tariff in advance of the winter and they can use it and they can have the benefit of it over the winter when they need it, and we think that that's fair to participants. Whereas if we were to hold up the tariff increase potentially for a consultation when we've already collected the views of participants, we we pretty much, we don't think we could get any more information of participants. You know, when we've already got that, and when in fact what the tariff is based on is cold hard facts and analysis of cold hard facts. The tariff's based on, there was 100% inspection, so it's based on capital costs, actual maintenance costs, and the fuel price differential that we monitored over 3 years to come up with this. You know, so holding up the tariff increase to do more consultation or to gather more views, you know, potentially that would have meant that the participants wouldn't have got their money in time for the winter, and that's when they need it, and we didn't think that was fair to the participants.
Given the wide level of information that you've received from stakeholders and genuine participants over a long period of time, is the department satisfied that the revised tariff will be met with, I'm not going to say enthusiasm, but will it be met in a welcoming manner by the participants in terms of the level that's been struck? And secondly, and just to finish on the point about the consultation that hasn't been published, given the legal complexities with this for a very long time, do you understand my concern as a member of the committee that I essentially won't be blindsided as to what consultation in terms of 400 odd responses would look like, and how that might be in stark contrast to what you're proposing in a revised tariff?
As I say, the vast majority of those who responded to the consultation wanted the scheme to remain open at and wanted the 2012 tariffs and wanted much higher tariffs, and that's I know that's a very whistle-stop note of what the consultation responses said. In terms of the participants, I would say that the current lower medium biomass payment it's currently looking 2.1p for tier 1 and 0p for tier 2, and that's changing to 5.1p for tier 1 and 1p for tier 2. And what that will deliver for participants this winter in that category, what that will deliver for the typical participant in that category. Now, I appreciate that some participants will have different heat use, so it will be different for everybody, but what that will deliver for the typical participant this winter is an increase of about £5,000, and I would rather see it in their pocket sooner rather than later. I would rather see that go into their pocket.
Will compensation be retrospective?
No.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Can I just wanted to check then, just in relation to the figures again there, so going from 5 million a year to 15, so that was based on tariff 1 went from, let's go through those figures again, sorry they just weren't provided.
I think we provided it in a letter to the committee, but I'll just read them out anyway. It's 2.1p for tier 1 and 0p for tier 2 for the lower medium biomass boiler, and it will go to 5.1p for tier 1 and 1p for tier 2. So it is a significant increase.
And then the overall projected budget then, total cost for revised tariffs is 160 million, if I picked that up right. But if the position of the executive is that the scheme will close and the estimated date for closure of the scheme is in and around before the April 26, is that right? How do we get to the figure?
For 2025, that's right.
How do we get to the figure of 160 million then?
The 160 million relates to if the scheme remained open and the forecast volumes and the forecast payments under the tariff continued to get paid to the end of the scheme. That's where that comes from.
Okay. So it doesn't take into account the view of the position of the executive that this will close by the 1st of April 2026. This is if this scheme continued on.
Based on continuation.
Okay. Okay. Philip?
Your last question was mine. I couldn't quite figure out how those things, so that's one question. In terms of the 5,000 that you said if we get the scheme done and dusted by November, or the revised tariffs by November, it would be worth 5,000. Is that over the winter? How many months are we talking about there?
That would be over a year. That would be over a year.
So an additional 5,000?
That would be over a year, but having said that, the reason that we really are aiming for the 1st of November and wanting to get it through by the 1st of November is to capture that winter period, because that's when the majority of the heat gets used. You know, in the summer months it mightn't be, it wouldn't be as bad. If you know, the next available winter would be, the next available time to uplift the tariff would potentially be spring, and then that window will be missed, and you know, the usage next year would be, you know, the usage over the springtime is lower because it's warmer.
So, I mean, I obviously got the same email, or some of the emails, probably as all the members, certainly as Jonathan was alluding to there. So, in terms of the process, so, I mean, the executive have taken a decision that they want to close the scheme, that in terms of the court case and the executive doing its work, it's going to renew the tariffs. So, can you explain the process of how the executive wants to close the scheme and what that means?
You will appreciate that it is very much a work in progress at the minute, and we're working through all the details, and the executive has said that it will, you know, it will take final decisions once we get to the stage where the full business case is done and dusted and we're ready to be looking at legislation. And that means it's very difficult for me to talk about closure or give any details on closure, you know, because obviously as a civil servant I can't prejudice anything that the executive might say in the future. But you know, just what I can say is, from our point of view, from our team's point of view, we're doing a lot of modelling, and what we're modelling is that the tariff that we've put before you today would be the tariff upon which any closure payments were made. That would form the basis of that calculation. That would be our intention.
Okay. And I mean, I know you can't definitively answer, but will there be compensation for capital costs included in the closure?
As I say, we are working on a model that's based on these tariffs in here. What's in this paper?
Okay.
So that's all. I can't.
No,
you know,
that's
there are a range of options in that business case, and you know, in case the executive want to pick a different one.
And just in terms of
sorry,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, and just to reiterate, as Sarah mentioned this earlier, you know, what is paramount is that balance between fairness to the participant and fairness to the taxpayer. But so that will be top of our understanding when it comes to closure.
Okay, fair enough. And in terms of the AMI money, so I mean, the department can't instigate a new scheme until the old scheme. I mean, they can't have the closing of one scheme and the opening of a new one running in parallel.
Any future use of AMI money will be subject to Treasury approval and agreement with Treasury. As we've said, what we need to do is to draw a line under RHI to allow us to really focus on putting that together and getting that done.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sinead?
Just briefly, because I'm really going back on what Jonathan raised in relation to the unpublished consultation. I think, you know, our experiences of RHI have been not very good, and that's both from the taxpayers' perspective and from those that were encouraged to participate in the scheme at the time. And there was a lot of encouragement to do that, a lot of hard sell as well, and lining up ducks in terms of bank loans and whatever else that entailed. So I think it's really important, because of the lack of transparency along this whole project. I think it's really important that we have true and open transparency at this point in time, and that the decision-making process is very much open for all, because it wasn't so clear in the past. And I don't see any reason really for the department to not show and tell, the results of the consultation, albeit, 400 responses, and widely they were saying, we want it to be in that very lucrative part, which was actually losing a lot of money for the taxpayer as well. But also, in this point where we're looking at new tariffs, is there engagement, true engagement with all the participants now at this stage to see where nobody's going back to the 2012 tariffs. Okay, so how do they sit now that they're aware of these new tariffs and what it means to them, and the fact that if they're agreed upon, that that they potentially that entry level would be 5k up. If they were accepted, what type of engagement is now really truly taking place in order for that open discussion to take place with the participants? A lot of them have been, pardon the pun, badly burnt in this, and they do deserve a bit of respect in terms of that true engagement and open consultation with the government department that actually nearly entrapped them into going down this route to begin with.
I fully understand what you're saying, and we will take away an action to provide you with more detail on the responses to that consultation. So we'll do that for you. In respect of communication with the participants, obviously RHI, in addition to being a very fraught scheme, is quite litigious scheme, and we were very mindful of not wanting to raise expectations of something that we couldn't deliver for participants. But what we have absolutely focused on is delivering something for participants which we think is fair as quickly as we possibly can. Now, they may well say that they want more or whatever, but I think they will appreciate that we're putting in the effort to get it to them before the winter period, which is the period that they really need it. And I think that that's clear. What we are going to have to do now is, and what we are currently doing, is working with Ofgem to ensure that once actual decisions are made on our ability to increase the tariffs for participants, that once actual decisions are made, that there is a communication strategy, and Ofgem will get in touch with the participants for them and let them know exactly what's happening and give them a bit more information. And that communication strategy will have to be very well worked out, because I do fully appreciate and fully respect the participants of the scheme, and that is essentially what was driving us to really try and get it for them for the winter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And appreciate this is a contentious topic, but really just to echo the point that Sinead and Jonathan had made around the consultation and the transparency of it, and I appreciate you've answered this, but I just want to put on record that when other public consultations happen, that doesn't determine the position that the department necessarily takes. They're often skewed. There will be different factors within it. But given openness and transparency is so important, it feels to me that this is at odds with kind of process of how we deal with public consultations in other areas. And I can appreciate that you are being cautious, but I would just like to feedback rather than an action with detail of what was said in the consultation. I'd really like to see the consultation responses. We'll be able to take from that what we will, but I think openness and transparency is absolutely crucial, and I think it's disappointing that that is being withheld.
I will take away an action to provide you with, as I said, with information on the consultation responses. Like I say, off the top of my head, I can tell you that the majority of people wanted the scheme to remain open at a higher tariff than was consulted upon, and preferably the majority of them wanted the 2012 tariff.
And I appreciate that you've said that, but if you can tell us that, why can't we see it?
I will take away an action.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you very much for that. I know that you're dealing with a very difficult situation as well, and the work that you've put into it. So from the committee, we appreciate the work that you've done to date on that. We'll probably have a deliberation now, and then request some additional information before making a decision. I imagine will be the view of the committee, but I'll wait to see what our colleagues wish to do. But we'll be in touch.
Yeah, and just before I leave,
yes,
just wanted to reiterate that the tariff that's before you wasn't based on opinion.
Yes.
It was based on
The
verified data,
the
100% inspection rate, and a 3-year period over which actual fuel price differentials were monitored and modelled. So we've done our level best to make it as accurate as we possibly can.
Thank you so much for that. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Gary, you to go. Okay. Okay, I'm going to attempt to summarise where we are with this one. So listen, this is whole situation is a contentious, fraught and difficult one. The position of the executive is that this scheme will close, but the position of the courts is that the current tariff that is currently in place is not acceptable, and their ruling was clear that a change in tariff had to be made in months, not years. But I don't think that we're, in my view, in a position yet to be able to make a decision on this SL1. Yes, the consultation responses may have said they wanted, on the whole, wanted to go back to the 2012. Well, that's clearly not going to be the case. The current one's not, that in place is currently not acceptable either. So, we're returning funding to Treasury every year, and a new scheme needs to be put in place if that's what happens. So I think we need to get a copy of that consultation response before making a decision. But Jonathan?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. I think you summed that up well. I don't feel comfortable, and I'm trying to differentiate the two issues,
yes,
which is, one is closure, which people can have their own view on. This right before us now is on the level of compensation, and given the legal complexities, I don't feel comfortable that I'm hearing the department's view on what a revised tariff, and I take on board that there's been a lot of work painstakingly into assessing what that level should be, but I would also like to hear from the genuine participants, and that's where I thought the consultation would have really helped us. Could we just really drill down also with them what will be the projected underspend under a revised tariff, and also clarity around whether that underspend will be able to be used for alternative projects, because I think it was alluded to that it would, but I remember in previous sessions being told, I think that was very, very complex and difficult to achieve. So it's just clarity.
You can just check those figures. So ring fence, Amy, is 33 million a year for this scheme. We currently spend 5, and then they're saying that it'll go up to 15. But if we could just double check those figures and how much will be surrendered back to Treasury. Okay, so if I'm summing up correctly, our members content that we go back to the department seeking full sight of the consultation, and also confirmation that the those figures that I just said are correct in relation to operating costs, ring fence to Amy, and then return funding to Treasury. This obviously, the department's view is they want to have this in place in November, but we still have time to make a decision on this, so we're happy that we do that.
Sure, just one final point, which is specific for the department. Could they outline the number of boilers that would be loss-making under their new revised tariff? I think they did have numbers on that.
Is it the case that the committee is looking in terms of the consultation, you want the report, you don't want to see the individual consultation responses, because that could be thousands of pages. And also, it sounds like what you want is the department has done some work to work out this tariff. You want to see the work. What did they do? As well as the information the chair has indicated about the return on EME and the number of loss-making boilers, which hopefully will be in that, but would ask for that specifically. And the projected underspend, but also perhaps seeking, just maybe for my benefit, a tariff timeline, because I'm a little bit confused about the period between 2020 and the present. and maybe the comparison with the rest of the UK in terms of tariffs, and the yes, and seeking side of that, and I think that's on the actual costs if curtailed. Yeah, okay, so if that's okay, does that make sense, members? Sorry, Anu.
Chair, just Sarah indicated that the tariff was based on cold, hard facts, and she emphasised it again just at the end of the presentation there. We don't really have the cold, hard facts. We don't see, like I can't see it anyway, I'm not really clear on them. So just if there could be more clarity just on those facts and figures.
Hopefully that would be, that's what I'm saying, is that they've done some work to come up with these tariffs.
Sorry.
So, no, but it's just to make sure we're on the same page, that
right,
it's where you're looking for that report, where did they get that number from?
Yeah.
And they will tell us, we worked it out this way. The 3 years, the 100% inspection rate, 3 years of and the price differentials and all that good stuff, so that we could then, so that members can be assured of the basis of the tariff.
Yeah.
If that's okay, Chairperson.
Again, what about the view of the participants based on what they now have heard in relation to the potential of the possible new tariffs? Is there any way that if an organisation or group could come and present to us and how this will impact on them?
Well, Chair, because this has been done in open session, I think organisations would be free to write to the committee and the committee could make a decision, but they need to do it soon, I would have thought, because we're up against it on the clock. So if it's 1st of November, this is going to have to come into effect by draft affirmative. It means it would have to go to plenary middle of October. So that means the department will probably try and lay the rule soon, in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. So is it the case that the committee is also seeking an oral brief from the department, say on the 25th of September?
And hopefully those who may represent members of the scheme may either be in this room or watching.
Because, Chair, I believe actually, and again, 2 separate issues, closure and revised tariff, but it goes to Philip's point actually. Some of the concerns might actually be contained within how closure would go about, whether that's capital costs on scrappage of certain equipment, whether that's that retrospective issue or... So I just think that there's a lot of unknowns which we, certainly the department, could maybe give a better steer to the industry and to us before we would make a decision.
I just think it's important to be clear whenever we are receiving representations that this is not in relation to a decision to close the scheme. That's not the legislation or proposed rules that are before this committee. There's been a clear court ruling this time last year that the Assembly needs to make a decision in relation to the tariff. And at some stage we're going to have to make that decision or we'll find ourselves back in that position again.
And indeed, Chair, as you've indicated, not only has it been done in public session, it's also been Hansarded, so anyone wanting to read what was said can read that. And watch
okay, are members content with all of that? Excellent, thank you, members. We'll then move to item 9, which is correspondence. I wish to advise members that an index has been provided at page 3.14. So item 2 is at page 316. The department previously launched a consultation on the integration of additional disability support within DFE training programs at entry level and level 1 skills for life and work. The latest correspondence is available. Are members content to note? Content to note, yep, thank you. Item 3 then, members, again, is for noting. Members are asked to note departmental responses in respect of DFE commissioned research and innovation supports and innovation language. Are we content? Thank you. Item 4, members are asked to note copies of DFE commissioned research on employee ownership, hybrid working, GDP and flexible working. Are members content? Content, yeah. Thank you. Item 5 at page 469, members are asked to consider an invitation to visit and request a briefing from NSERC. Are members at this stage happy to decline owing to our forward work plan, but we'll revisit this in the new year? Members content? Thank you.
Members?
Yep. Item 6, page 471, members are asked to consider an invitation to a wind energy event and members can attend if they are free. Are they content? Thank you. Item 7, members are asked to note a copy of the pivotal report on the Northern Ireland Executive. Members content to note? Thank you. Item 8, members are asked to note a copy of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission newsletter for August 2024. Are members content to note? Thank you. And Any queries in relation to any of those? If not, we'll then move to item 10, which is the forward work plan. Refer members to page 505 and ask Peter if he wants to highlight anything to us.
Chair, just to remind members that next week we are in the City of Derry in the County of Londonderry, and we'll be starting at noon. And I know the Foyle MLAs will be there. Now I know they have an event at 10:30, very important event. Biggest. Oh, sorry, there's Padraig.
Sorry, sir.
Sorry, Mr. Delargy, I think. Do you want to come in?
No, finish your point. Sorry, it was just on an AOB item.
Okay, sorry. 18th September, we're in McGee College, Great Hall. There's an event on at 10th. It starts at 10, doesn't it? Finishes at 11:30. So we'd hope that once the Derry Journal and Londonderry Sentinel have got their pictures taken, members will come along and remember the committee meeting, because we'll be on our quorum. It'll be a short one. We'll just have the McGee Expansion Task Force. We've got their interim report. That's what it will be. There will then be a short tour of McGee College, and that will be that. And then we'll have an informal buffet lunch. And then we'll come back to Foyle another day to do all of those other things that members want to do. It sounds like on the 25th of September, we'll be hearing from the department again on RHI, and the rest is as was agreed last week. Hope that's all clear, members.
I just want to say there was a quite long programme that we had arranged for the visit to Foyle, and now it's extremely shortened. And the reason the content and those that were going to do presentations was around regional balance, and I think that has to be visited another day in depth, because we always question when we come into committee, what is a good job? But honestly, you ask the same question, what is regional balance? And you have 1,000 different answers, and so this really has to be brought into focus, and regional balance is not just about the Northwest, and I understand that completely, but there are significant, I think it is the area that will actually throw the mirror on what regional balance actually might look like. So I do think a bigger day in the home city is required.
Can we look then, Peter, at maybe trying to get a date at some point for that scheduled into the forward work plan? Obviously we were keen to do it, just with the announcement of even more funding going to your constituency next Wednesday. That's been slightly
okay, Philip, will let you off.
Padraig.
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah, just 2 points, just to concur with that. I think, look, obviously today there's been quite a few elements on regional balance, and that has been a continuous theme going forward. And I think the further that we push this programme of work back, the less informed as a committee we are. So I think it's really important that that schedule is honoured in full. And I would totally concur with Sinead on that. It's important that this actually informs our work going forward. I don't think it can be an add-on. I actually think that it needs to happen before we take on this body of work. So I think it's essential that we do it as soon as possible. My second point is around the comments which we've already made. Obviously, just before summer recess, we had a joint session with the Education Committee, which was on, I suppose, working together more closely. I think that we need to do another session like that. But what I would be keen to do, Chair, with your agreement and with other agreement of other members here as well, is I think we need to write to the Department of Education to actually get an update on what joint work is happening, because clearly there was a huge, or there were a huge number of suggestions coming out of the last meeting on how we could work together better, on what we could do, particularly on removing I suppose the funding model that's in place for schools, which is so dependent on trying to get students through the door rather than what's better for those students. So I think we need to keep that in mind, and I would like for us to write to the department for an update on what collegiate work is happening, and for us to potentially schedule another joint session as well.
Agreed.
Agreed, members.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay, any members, any other business? If not, can I thank each and every one of you for your attendance and contribution. And next week's committee will be scheduled to begin at 12 noon at the McGee campus of Ulster University. And I agree that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Members agreed?
Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, Sound.